Hello, everybody. How's it going?
Hello. Hey, guys. How you doing?
It's very good.
Oh, I just want to say something right off the top. Everybody's going crazy over the cat video. It's so funny from the Zoom.
God. Oh my god.
Have you got a cat thing to do?
No, but so I made a joke that that video was so funny that everyone's going to be using the cat filter on all their Zoom chats today.
Yeah.
But everybody interpreted that as we're all going to be using the cat filter.
So they did?
So I just want to apologize to everybody expecting us all to have the cat filter.
Oh no.
I'm so sorry to let you down.
We can't have the cat filter because we're speaking to a furry man. James Dreyfus is joining us. He's got a lovely beard, and we don't want to confuse anyone further. Let's just go straight into it with James, because James is as up on all this stuff as we are. James, hello, lovely to see you.
Hello, Archie, Glinner.
Very, very nice to see you.
I see. No cat.
Helen thought the gay men should be on top this time as a thank you for coming on. So I'll go down the bottom with Helen.
I think we're honoured, aren't we?
Well, although there's been some bad behaviour today from certain quarters, a lot of lesbophobia, a lot of homophobia, a lot of misogyny. It's been quite a day, so I'm really glad to have you on, James, to balance all that out. Someone on Twitter had a meltdown, extraordinary behavior, really, from a supposed investigative journalist who at one point was talking to someone with my avatar, thinking it was me. So not that great in certain ways, but also he did a really horrible thing. He started smearing LGB Alliance, as people are want to do, and then they wrote him a direct message saying, we think you've been misinformed about us. Could you get back in touch? And he sent them the most abusive, nastiest response, as if, these are two women who lived through Section 28, who fought Section 28, who helped gay men during the AIDS crisis, and this is how this arsehole treats them. It's just disgraceful.
And not only did he tell them to fuck off, he then advertised the fact, thinking that this would get him plaudits.
Yeah.
And when it didn't necessarily get him plaudits, he sort of escalated and sort of almost went insane with anger and self-righteousness. I think I was thinking he's having to fuel his own outrage in order to sort of justify his original sort of absolute hate.
Absolutely, yeah.
And you can see the justification continuing, and then the obvious rewriting of the narrative. When I wrote this down, he said, the extremity of the backlash for expressing moderate support for gender recognition. So he's doing it as if what he's done is express just moderate support for gender recognition. And he's had this most horrendous backlash. And he said, if I hadn't 11 years ago had death threats from Al-Qaeda, I wouldn't have been able to handle yesterday.
Amazing.
Which
just
is,
amazing.
what is he comparing people there to?
Yeah.
And so he's
literally calling the LGBT Alliance a hate group and telling a couple of lesbians to go to fuck off and die or whatever, if that's moderate, then what on earth is extreme?
It actually is.
But it's the age-old tactic, isn't it? It's turn everything on its head. It's suddenly becoming the victim. It's saying, I support trans people, therefore you don't. It's playing that game as well. And
which is what happened with you.
Completely disingenuous, because no one is against trans people. This is what the point I've been trying to make, a point Bev and Kate constantly make, and they make it eloquently, politely all the time. And all I ever see is it starting off as a sort of rational debate, escalating into abuse every single time.
Every time.
James, now I could be wrong, but you have had something like 3 years now of this kind of abuse. And am I right in thinking that this is all because you signed the letter asking Stonewall to bring down the toxicity of the debate?
That's where it started. It started with that. And then I added not cis into my bio. And that is one of a certain news site's particular favourite. James Dreyfus, not James Dreyfus the actor, James Dreyfus, who has not cis in his bio, is now my description.
Right.
And then obviously the support against the disgusting abuse, the relentless abuse towards J.K. Rowling by people who haven't seen anything. It's sort of escalated like that. But I find now you don't even need to reference anything to do with the trans issue. If you refuse pronouns or you refuse cis, the labeling is automatic. So,
yes.
And this is an issue you can't just dip your toe into. It's impossible. You're immersed. From the moment you open your mouth, you're immersed. And actually, I'm all in favour for letting these people continue to speak. Continue to dig your own grave, because we're all watching it. We're all watching the relentless abuse. There was a dreadful person on the other day saying, there was a video that I think someone we all know on Twitter circulated of someone saying, I have a womb and you can go and fuck yourselves. And you obviously all saw it, but this is the most astonishing. And I try to make the distinction when I'm talking with people between transsexuals who want to just get on with their lives, and I blame it all on this completely disingenuous Stonewall umbrella, which drags everyone together when it's really obvious, very different needs and very different circumstances.
That's
well,
right.
A very interesting thing. I always thought it was very revealing when Rosie Duffield liked a tweet, because that's what the Witchfinders are trying to get her for. That Maya Forstater that said something like, "This is not about transsexual rights. This is about cross-dresser rights in the workplace," and everyone went mad. Oh, she's calling trans people cross-dressers. Again, deliberately conflating transsexuals with everybody else under the trans umbrella, because as we all know, Stonewall's definition of trans includes cross-dressers, and cross-dressers are the vast majority of people who now have a who are trans-identified. I'm not talking about women in this case, the trans men, because they are actually going through huge physical changes, because they're encouraged to by AGP men who've gone through no physical changes. The amount of people, the amount of AGP men who have said puberty blockers are vital, puberty blockers are important, they're reversible, and blah. They haven't had a thing, like they haven't done. It's right. So outrageous.
And it's interesting. This the sort of rewriting of history as well. The sort of the counterfactual saying, if I'd have had them when I was a teenager, I'd be so much happier, etc., etc.
Yes.
But with absolute, there's no proof of this at all. Nobody can ever say this, and it's possible that if they'd have had them as teenagers, they wouldn't have become AGP men. So it's completely disingenuous, and it's in order to push the narrative again.
I really see that a lot of these really extreme trans actors, activist actors, they don't understand what their condition is. There are so many genuine transsexuals of the AGP variety and the homosexual variety who understand, especially the homosexual transsexuals. Privately to their friends, almost all of them will admit that they're gay males and that they're doing this to treat their, I worked at a trans bar. Everybody knew what was up. They acknowledge their situation. They're living as women, but they can acknowledge that they're gay males, and they can acknowledge solidarity with the gay community. Some just want to get, some are like, they wouldn't say this publicly. They're not going to put it on a billboard, but we've got these small groups of people who are just in outright denial, who are just like, no. I am literally transcending biological sex. And you see that a lot with AGP too. People who are not understanding that transition is a therapeutic treatment for a mental health condition. And if you go through with it and you don't understand what you've done, you can't come to terms with the fact that you haven't literally changed sex, and this is just a treatment to help you. You're never going to be happy. You're never going to, you're not you're not undergoing the right treatment. You're just digging yourself into a cult.
Well, one of the recent study into puberty blockers not only found out that there was a bone density decrease and all the things we already know about, but they found that it does not help dysphoria. They do not help dysphoria. And I've heard this from psychotherapists, of whom I know a few now because of this, because they contact me secretly. They can't even tell some of their patients that they don't believe in this stuff. And they tell me that they see this in young women, especially. They've had puberty blockers, they've had all the treatments, and they're not happy. They are not happy. And the thing that I worry about most of all in this is, as you know, one of their greatest weapons is to weaponize suicide. And I worry that it's actually a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because as someone in Australia, this Australian guy, pediatrician, said, was a pediatrician? Sorry, what's the one that deals with children? I always get mixed up.
Pediatrician.
Pediatrician.
He was a pediatrician, and he said, if there is depression and if there is suicide, maybe it's because these people have discovered there's no pot of gold at the end of this rainbow. And the fact that, and that's why I think that certain AGP men, one of whom is a new YouTube channel, I believe, has overtaken us in viewers, so congratulations to that person. But certain AGP men are actually evil in telling children this lie. It's a vicious lie. They never had puberty blockers, and now they're telling kids that they should. You're a fucking liar, Chris.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to be fair, there is.
I didn't say his name.
There is. I mean, a lot of this is built on lies, isn't it? I mean, you've got the main lie that spawns everything else, which is trans women are women, taken literally, as opposed to how it started, which was to say, well, in some circumstances, maybe we can sort of treat trans women as women in certain areas, but then there are other areas, such as single-sex spaces, etc., where we shouldn't. But
yes.
That's where it originated, with people saying, well, in some circumstances, yes, some circumstances, no. But the fact that people like the chap who had a meltdown yesterday on Twitter, it's got to be, it's an absolute all or nothing. And if you don't take it literally, then you're just motivated by hate. And it's astonishing to me that this is a movement who want to suggest that sex isn't actually binary, that it's a spectrum. However, it's an all or nothing. It's binary. If you either believe it or you don't believe it. If you believe it, then you're true and pure. If you don't, you're simply a hateful bigot.
Yeah, and that was never supposed to be the way. Trans care is supposed to be,
There's no in between,
No.
It's absolutes. Again, it's dealing in absolutes. It's a child's argument. It's either one thing or another. It's like being told at the moment, by Stonewall, this is like a gay rights movement of the, of the 80s. And no, it isn't. It isn't. Yeah. It's disingenuous, because the gay rights movement was not impinging upon the rights of another group. Yeah. And this is my argument. It's saying no one hates you because of that. We need a debate, a clear debate, to sort this out. Because your rights are going to impinge and have a massive effect on over half the population. And that's what I find so extraordinary. But immediately you suggest that. I mean, look at the response to the Stonewall letter we wrote to the Times. I mean, we instantly asking for a debate meant hate.
Yeah. I feel really, really bad for people who just want to do the right thing. I think so many people are just so confused by this, and they're really just regurgitating slogans because they don't understand and they're scared and they don't want to say the wrong thing. I really do think that that's what's going on for so many people, because people don't understand that increasing trans rights, making the lives better for transsexuals and transgender people, means making sure they have workplace protection and housing protection and access to healthcare, and more resources put into to mental health care and physical health care for trans people. But activists are saying we're supposed to be increasing trans rights means taking transsexualism more and more literally, right? You make trans lives better by pretending sex is less and less real and gender identity is more and more real, because that's sort of the fantasy. But that's not actually going to make even transsexuals' lives better, because they're still, at the end of the day, especially when they move into later phases in their lives, when you're young, being recognized sexually to your to the sex partners you want matters a lot, and your identity is something you're forming a lot. But as you get older, you just become comfortable with your body, and you're a lot less interested in that, and you're going to be a lot more concerned about your bodily integrity and your bodily health. So all of these transsexuals who are chasing all this stuff, it's not, you know what I mean? I'm kind of losing my train of thought, but no, transsexuals need healthcare, not affirmation of literal sex change. Yes. You know. And people need to understand that too, that helping transsexuals means giving them better health care, giving them rights and protections to be transsexuals, not pretending they have literally transcended the bounds of biological reality, you know?
And which is a lie that can only last for so long. And every time they whack up against reality, it's going to make them sadder and sadder. And, you know, as I say, that self-fulfilling prophecy of a lot of depressed people is something being created by the trans rights movement in its current incarnation.
And this goes back
to something that James, sorry, go ahead, Helen.
Sorry, something that James said earlier about, you know, I want you to keep on talking. You know, for me, you know, it was definitely people just wanted me off Twitter. They didn't want me to talk. They didn't want to hear what I had to say. Whereas I never report anyone on Twitter apart from threats of violence, because I don't want people not to have their friends to talk to, their network of people. I don't want to take them away from that. It's actually cruel to do that. But, you know, but it does seem to be a movement that's attracted a lot of people who are genuinely just unpleasant and want to silence other people. They don't want to talk. They don't want to have a conversation. They don't want the conversation to happen. They want the conversation to be stopped and people to actually just have to accept what's being said. I'm perfectly happy to talk to people because I think, you know, my argument is sound. But sadly, and this goes back to something that I saw. I mean, it was just dreadful. Your little app where you can, people can buy you a coffee. People were trying to actually get you banned from that app, both of you, for no other reason than to just be unpleasant, to make your lives worse, to actually, for no other reason than to be unpleasant and cruel. I can't see any other reason for it. It's just vindictive nastiness. Well,
let me use that to go on to James, because James, I've written before about the way that Big Finish was at the company. There's an interesting story here that I'll briefly tee up for you, James. But James was played the Master from Doctor Who on a radio version. And recently, the company that put it together, Big Finish, they had a compilation of all the people who played the Master through Doctor Who's history. Big celebration of them, except for James. They took James off the publicity because. And can I ask James?
Not just the publicity. They took me off. I'm not included as the Master. I was erased from history.
My God.
And this was done, all of this. I would have, you know, something I've had more respect for them. They picked up the telephone and said, I see you signed that letter to the Times. We personally don't agree with you, and therefore we will not be working with you again. And I would have gone, right, okay, you feel that way. I would have had respect for them. The fact of the matter is, they did all this without even contacting me. I was noticing, as you wrote in your article, my name was disappearing from the audio CDs, and my picture was disappearing. And I kept calling my agent saying, but I'm in this, aren't I? Aren't I in this episode? And she'd say, yes. And then she'd make a quick one and then come back and go, yes, sir, they made a mistake. So they were bullshitting all the time.
Wow.
What the interesting thing is that there is one more to come out that I did with the extremely popular Tom Baker.
Oh!
But I want to know what's going to happen when that comes out. Will people listen to the Tom Baker bits and then fast forward through the Master? How is this going to work, I wonder? It's the underhand nature of it. And it came from nothing I'd said, nothing I'd written down. People always say to me, you're transphobic. I ask them, I rarely lock down, I don't delete my tweets. I say, find me something. Find me anything. And I know they don't exist because I don't believe in transphobia. I don't believe in all that, and I would never have said it. But this is where it started. So you see Big Finish fed the news outlet online, and it's feeding other things. And so, I mean, but that was the kernel of where things really got out of hand.
It creates a stink. It's in the same way that Helen being banned from Twitter for asking the question. I always forget the phrasing of it. I always jumps out of my head. And it's the question I know more than any other question. Do you believe that women have... Go on, Helen.
Male-bodied people with a penis should have the right to undress in a communal changing room with women and girls. Brilliant.
Thank you. She was thrown off Twitter for asking that question. And now that she's gone and can't defend herself, all these scumbags are allowed to smear her in her absence, you know? Like you've obviously had, like, that's like two things that you did, James. You signed the original letter to Stonewall when I think I asked you, so I really feel sorry. Yeah. I do apologize for getting into all this, but oh my God, I'm so guilty. I'm going to put on Lear and you're going to play the whole cast. But then you signed the letter to the Times and you put not cis in my thing. Like, how is your standing in the industry now, do you think? I mean, what do you think will happen next?
Possibly non-existent. Well, certainly amongst younger people, certainly. I'm sure that theatre is a no-go zone for me. I'm sure that there'll be instances of I'm not working with him. I've heard he's transphobic, you know, and that will be enough. I'm just hoping that, you know, sensible people in the television and film industry manage to see through it, or perhaps do something which is unheard of, which is a bit of search and try and find evidence of this allegation towards me. I was recently called on by an online publication, anti-trans, and I complained about them, and they knew it was wrong because they removed it 5 minutes later.
Total Film said that about me. I'm thinking of suing them for that. Total Film said that about me.
You'll have trouble because it's an opinion, and it's a headline, and apparently they come way down on the list. But it's ongoing, believe me. I just cannot get over what really gets me, and we've seen it: Brexit, Leavers, Remainers, Trump, Biden, Stonewall against gays and lesbians, Corbynistas versus Labour. The splits now between all of them, and even in this argument, as the extreme hatred and violence is out of control. It is so extraordinary. I've never seen people speak to the way they speak to people about this issue. TERFs die. I get sent photographs willing my mother dead by people holding pictures of axes and baseball clubs and guns saying, I'm going to kill you, TERF. Where did this come from? Where did all this unfettered hatred come from? This is what I don't understand. So no wonder no debate can be had, because they're encouraged not to have debate.
Well, I really think it's like there's this term called false enforcement that I learned from a wonderful blog with two psychoanalysts, Stella O'Malley and Sasha Ayad, had this amazing podcast about gender. They're talking about a psychological phenomenon called false enforcement. Remember, I was saying a moment ago how I think a lot of outsiders are just afraid because they don't understand and they just want to say the right thing. False enforcement is when you come down hard on people because you believe something, and you can see that if anyone knows that you believe something, there's a high social penalty for being found out for believing it. So if you see someone else expressing a belief in the same thing you believe, you're going to attack them for it. So that's why I think everyone's so like evil TERFs. They're like, they doth protest too much because they're afraid, because they actually agree with you and they're scared of the social cost and they don't understand. So I think that's a real piece of what's going on. It's this strange psychological self-jujitsu where people themselves don't believe trans women are literally women, but they're scared because they're seeing the social penalty of admitting it. So they're attacking anybody who dares to stand up. But there's another thing I wanted to mention. When you were talking about, James, all you did was say not cis, essentially, and sign a letter. Maya Forstater, you mentioned her a minute ago. She put out an essay this week. It's a beautiful essay. All she did was quote at length, I think his name is Václav Havel, the Czech writer and dissident who became the prime minister of the Czech Republic and Czechoslovakia before. He had written this amazing piece in 1979 about, it was called The Power of the Powerless. And he's talking about how in the communist regime, you know, if you're like a grocer, say, every time your oranges or your fruits get delivered, they'll give you a placard to put in your window that says, "Workers of the world unite." And you just put the placard in the window because that's what you're expected to do. It doesn't mean you actually care about the workers of the world. It means you have to put the placard in your window and say that you care about this issue. Yeah. What if you decide not to? What if you feel like this is just an empty sloganeering and it doesn't matter whether I believe it or not, I just don't think I should be forced to put the sign in the window. Then suddenly, immediately, people will attack you for not putting the sign in your window, right? Suddenly, people are going to say, "Oh, you hate the workers of the world. You're obviously horrible." And then from there, you're going to lose your standing in society. They're going to take your business away. And she's quoting this story at length, and she's just interspersing it with images of modern day trans activism, people putting rainbow flags and trans flags in their windows and in their bios and their pronouns. And as the debate escalates, it's exactly parallel what's going on. The communist regime said you have to adhere to these slogans that are all friendly on the surface, or we will destroy you. And that is precisely what's going on with the woke left. You have to adhere to these slogans. Workers of the world unite is trans women and women, right? It's the same thing. It's all pretty and shiny on the surface. How could you possibly be against something so nice and friendly? But if you have any issues at all, they will just destroy you. So you're being forced to play along. Anyways, I just thought it was a fascinating essay because we compare academically the communist regime and the Stasi to what's going on with the left. But I think it's not just academic. I think it's literal. I think we're entering, with all wokeness right now, an era of like, we're really, really losing.
Well, someone said someone said an interesting thing recently. They said maybe, and I always considered myself part of the left. I know we all did, but they said maybe Stalinism isn't actually a bug. Maybe it's a feature. Maybe Stalinism is something that left-wing people or groups kind of fall into if they get too much power. And I think one thing that's happened recently is that the left lost all power in actual political life. They lost Brexit. They lost Trump won in the States. And as a result, they just try to build their power in other areas. So they have absolute power in places like the theater and in places like the media, in magazines and stuff. And instead of using that power, you know, in a careful, considered way, they are absolutely abusing it. The Guardian, would you believe, is about to do this diversity in the workplace seminar for the people who work at the Guardian, right? With Joyland Mom, who blocks every single woman who disagrees with him, and Sean Fay, who said, "Enjoy your erasure" to a woman. And people were saying, "Oh, he was only sorry, they were only joking," and it's like, well, imagine if a woman had said that about a trans-identified male, their career would be over. But these people are allowed to say anything they want to and about women. It's absolutely disgusting. And here's another funny thing. Our Meltdown man, the man behind the curtain, today he was told by various different lesbians and gay people that the term fish was misogynistic, right? And he's like, "Oh, fuck you. No, you're all bigots. Fuck you." And then a trans person said it to him, immediately apologizes. "I'll never use it again."
Yeah, this is not a surprise. But this goes back to what Artie was saying. I think Artie's insights there were very, very interesting. But there's also, I think, a simpler reason. And that is that mainly this fight certainly started between women and male people who wanted women, or who still want women, to look after them, to give up their rights to be the carers. And women have said no. And women saying no to men, let's say, is something that just angers them out of proportion, sort of massive disproportionate anger. And because this fight is so very much centered around women, with obviously men have come into it latterly, more and more men actually, but not enough. And I think that's a massive part of it, is that you've got men just looking at women saying, just astounded that they won't just accept what's been asked of them, or what's been told for them to do. They're not even asking, they're just telling. And I think that's where a large part of it comes from. It's the same old, men wanting women to do something and getting furious if they won't.
And it's also, if I may say as well, there is and excuse me for being the one to bring this up because it's not really my place, but there is a historic misogyny and lesbophobia among some gay men. I think that's not unfair to say, is it?
No, well, the word fish is a perfect example. That came right out of gay drag culture,
Absolutely, it came right out of. I mean, I read a tweet today saying there was a celebration for the Stonewall, the original Stonewall March, and they were having a dance at night, and it was calm and celebrating. And right at the bottom, it said "no fish," and
wow.
And this woman said, "What have I been? What was I marching for today? What was I doing today?" It was a very interesting tweet, and a very sad tweet actually, because you could tell it absolutely broke her heart. And thought, what is this? It's always been there. It's always, not by all gay people, of course, but by, I remember hearing it a lot.
Yeah. Well, I it's been really wonderful recently to see Mr. Meno, for instance, fighting back against that. I interviewed him the other day, and it was just so refreshing. He was in tears just talking about the women who've been fighting this, and especially lesbians, and he feels like that they've been betrayed. They've been absolutely betrayed after what they did during the AIDS crisis, after Section 28, to for Meltdown Man to call Bev and Kate bigots after all they've done, when he was still wiping it, his mother was still wiping his arse, they were fighting homophobia, and now he's calling them a bigot. I mean, it beggars belief. It really does, Yeah.
It's really throwing. I mean, it's literally throwing them under the bus. It's like, oh, I can see a way forward. I just need to get rid of half the population. I find it staggering, and I find it staggering when they turn everything round and call us the bigots in this. I always think to myself, what does your mother think about this? What does your sister think about this? What does your daughter think about? What does your niece think about this?
But I'm very much afraid, though, beginning to be, that this is what people want. It isn't necessarily about an ending or winning a fight. It is just the battle. It is the ability to just call women names with impunity, to send them threats, to silence them. Looking at some of the things on Twitter, sort of almost objectively, because I tend not to really join in with this possible new account that I have. It's more just sort of reading, and a lot of it, I think, is about just being in a gang, just ganging up on women, being able to silence them. Let's get her next. Let's throw her off. Let's be cruel. Let's try and get these people banned from this. The joy of the misogyny and the anger and feeling self-righteous and sort of hiding behind that and being able to almost just denigrate people with impunity. I'm afraid it seems to me that's almost what they're after. Not necessarily an ending. Not, and if women said, okay, you could have this, they'd be like, all right, well, we want something else now, because actually I'm enjoying this ability to denigrate and to send memes and to be furious.
But Helen, could I just ask what you think? Where do you think this will go? I mean, because to me, this is sort of escalating. 10% every day, not every week, every day. And I always seem to think that at some point this will burst. But the boil seems to sort of keep growing and growing. And where do you think it will end?
Well, I do think that the government need to step in and be very clear. Women want to, there's three things that women want. And that is to have their single-sex spaces protected, or just for the government to say, yes, in the Equality Act, you are allowed to have some spaces when you're in a position of vulnerability by yourself. Sports, you are allowed to play sports away from male-born people. And yes, let's be very, very careful over what we do to children. Those are the three things. That's it.
May I
actually want.
May I add one more? Just one more. Women are free from abuse when they want to talk about these things. That's the fourth. I mean, that's the most extraordinary aspect, that even opening your mouth about this leads you to get vilified.
Well, yes, absolutely. But if the government then did actually clarify everything, then at least we'd be able to say, like, Twitter wouldn't, well, I think Twitter would have had a much harder time saying, well, look, we're going to ban you for something that, in fact, I wouldn't even necessarily need to ask the question, because if the government would just say, yes, this is, women are allowed this, that's absolutely right, we could actually move on and, try and find a way of accommodating everyone, maybe sort of helping to campaign for third spaces for trans women who feel uncomfortable in the sort of toilets and changing rooms for their sex. But that's just not happening. Like the government, they've sort of blown hot and cold on it. Occasionally they've said, oh yeah, we will clarify this, and then we get nothing. I mean, to be fair, we've had COVID, so it is possible that, if without COVID, they might have done it. But if we would just do this, I think it would go a long way from our side anyway. But I do worry that is not something that the other side would be at all happy with, and the escalation would just continue. I don't know.
Well, here's what I don't get, right? You have all these people who have obviously, as you say, sociopathic attitudes towards women, and they're cruel, and they try and get people cancelled and all that sort of thing. They're what they are. There's nothing really you can do. They'll always be with us. What I don't understand, and it hits me all the time, is where are the adults in the room? Like, to take Stonewall for an example. Stonewall know very well that this is ripping the LGBT people apart. It's ripped, and it's harming transsexuals, it's harming LGBT people, and yet Stonewall, who could at any point have stepped forward and said, actually, we do need to have a proper chat about this and clear things up and make sure that we're all operating from this on the same level of reality. But if that conversation never happens, then it's going to be war forever, because I know I'm speaking for myself. I will never accept this stuff. I think it's dangerous. I think it's dangerous to kids. I think there's going to be tragedies just around the corner from a lot of kids who are regretful about transitioning, and I won't accept women as second-class citizens. I just won't accept it. So the idea that they just think they can ram it through, where are the adults in that organization?
Yeah. Well, it's also scary because they're building a wall. I did a tweet the other day, but like in 1959, 1960, 1961. East Berlin started building the wall, and everybody just kind of saw it happening, but didn't really recognize the gravity. So people didn't flee from the east to the west because they thought, I'll do it next week. There's this stuff going on. And then eventually that wall went up, and it was like, oh shit, I can't get across the border anymore. And then of course they reinforced the wall more and more and more, to the point where you literally would die if you even tried to get out. They're building the wall. They're making it illegal. They're adding these hate crime laws, these conversion therapy laws. All these laws are being erected. It's going to be so much harder to get these laws off the books once they're on them. If they actually manage to pass a law that says if you acknowledge someone's biological sex, you're committing an act of hate, that is like that's going to be a long time to get that out of the books. And it's going to make this war so much more difficult. They're building East Germany. They're building a state where a police state where you're not allowed to acknowledge sex anymore and women's rights. And, it sounds like crazy, but we're watching them do it. It's like in 1959, no one really believed there would actually be, you'd be murdered for crossing from East to West Berlin. Well, no one believes you're going to be arrested for acknowledging biological sex yet, but it's coming. They're doing it right in front of us,
I do not understand how people aren't I think I'm just about to put up on my site a thing about the NHS using phrases like pregnant people and stuff like this. I don't understand. Chest feeding is the feeding. Yeah. And I think the last time anyone was insulted by the word breastfeeding was never. No one is insulted by this word, So this is just like Stonewall, who are getting in touch with some key people in certain organizations, HR managers, executives who aren't really paying attention and think, yeah, whatever, if that's what the kids are doing, I don't care. And as a result, whole organizations are being poisoned by this nonsense. I think it's like we need to figure out how to stop those key people from corrupting places, because it's like there was three recent Mumsnet am I being unreasonable threads, and the vast majority of the women on that site did not agree with the Stonewall position on these matters. They absolutely did not agree. So I don't think that this has any popular traction. It's just that you turn on the BBC and they're talking about 100 genders. No one believes this, apart from this person who's saying this on the BBC.
Well,
BBC
they don't even believe it. They don't believe it.
Yeah.
That's right. They don't believe it. Nobody believes it. Literally no one believes it. It's a mantra that people are saying because they want other people to believe it so that they can they think that they can have better lives because of it, and other people are saying it because they think it makes them nicer or better, or that means that they can have some fun shouting at women. Nobody actually believes it because it would be insane.
Yeah.
God, it's like I can't stop thinking of this image that's a meme that's been going around. My friend, a gay gender critical named Matt Zaleo, he reposted it yesterday. It's this roller coaster, and it's like a science fiction image from like a pulp thing. There's like happy people on a roller coaster going up the ride, and then the next car in front of them exiting the roller coaster, they've turned into these ghoulish zombies. And it says the people going into the roller coaster is like, gender critical's new to the gender wars, and then the ghoulish zombies are like, seasoned and
embittered veterans.
Yeah, embittered veterans. I mean, we all start just like, okay, I'm a little bit critical of this, but I want to be nice. Surely there's a middle ground. Let's be polite here, And then 6 months later, you're like, oh my God, what the hell is going on? Do you feel there was a bit of that with you, James? When you said not cis, did you realize that a couple years later?
Something? I had no idea. I just thought, cis man? What are you talking about? I'm a man. I don't know what a cis man is. I looked it up and thought, well, that's ridiculous. I mean,
is it short for sissy? I could go for that.
Do I have to do if an aardvark comes into the room? Do I have to make up a word so I don't exclude the aardvark? I choose not to use it. If other people choose to use it, fine. I choose not to say hello. I'm James Dreyfus. My pronouns are he, him. I choose not to do that because to me it's fucking obvious.
Yeah.
I don't understand this. It's not just about inclusion because, of course, everyone wants to be inclusive. It's forced inclusion that I object to. It's the forcing of it. It's people saying, why won't you sleep with me? If you won't sleep with me, you must be transphobic. Sorry? How did we get there? I have a particular type of man I find attractive. I have a certain type. I have a certain thing. Does that mean that I loathe people who are 4'9" and have no hair? It just means not you, Arnie.
Well, there are a lot of chances. Wait, no curly whirly for you, James. No curly whirly for you.
But where does that come from? Where did that appear? I mean, what happened to getting on with your life and getting your nose out of everyone else's? It's this authoritarianism that I can't stand. And I'm afraid the more people who get authoritarian with me, the more I resist, the more I bunker in, the more I will not be pushed down. So I had no idea Nazis was going to create this. And the fact that it has is very telling.
Yeah. Well, the whole "why won't you better sleep with me" thing, I find that so offensive as a gay man. We know, I keep repeating this, 98% of males are not sexually attracted to me back on the basis of my sex. 98% of men want to sleep with women, and I want to sleep with 100% of men. So that means there's a, I have to deal with it. Most people I want to sleep with don't want to sleep with me back. I mean, imagine if gay rights was insisting that all straight men should start liking dicks. The trans rights movement is doing that now, literally.
Yeah.
You
It's true. By the way, can I just quickly say, Artie isn't small. It's just that when he leans back in his chair, lean back there. See, he just looks small. He just looks small when he leans back in his chair.
James, I've heard tell that Graham is actually 6'4".
Yeah, there you go.
In Irish terms, that's like 8'7".
James, can I ask, have you had any, has anyone actually ever said anything personally to you, to your face? Has anyone ever actually in real, never? It's always online. Never. It's always by, it's people like Big Finish not calling you. That's what it is.
Never.
Yeah.
Not one person. And the only, and I have to be honest about this, and I am writing an article about this soon. And I hate to say it, but ever since I came out, age 16, the only real abuse I've had has been from gay men in clubs for not being good enough or buff enough or handsome enough or have, look cool. And when I became sort of relatively well recognizable, it escalated. It got worse and worse and worse. And I keep thinking to myself, I thought this was supposed to be a community. I thought we were supposed to be working towards equality, because we have to acknowledge in the gay community, it's certainly amongst males, it's very body fascist. It's very, it's all about what you like, and also there's this other thing that goes unspoken. A lot of men don't admit to, a lot of gay men don't admit to, is that they find the idea of a straight man is infinitely more attractive than a camp gay man, let's say, for example. Now, these are truths that don't detract. You're telling tales on our club. Well, I mean, that is the truth. And that has been my experience. And so, but no one, I mean, if we weren't in lockdown, maybe, as if I'd gone to a pub and suddenly someone comes up and takes issue, I don't know. But since this has happened, we haven't been on lockdown, no one has said anything to me. But people have quietly unfollowed me on Twitter. I've noticed that people I used to engage with publicly on Twitter have gone very quiet. It's almost like, like by association, retweet by association. And I've noticed a marked decrease in the amount of people. It's so much so now that I get worried on their behalf if I tweet, "Hi, how you doing?"
Yes.
I do it privately.
Yes, I used to have that feeling. Yeah. I used to get that feeling, I used to actually think, I shouldn't actually say hello to him because people will attack him and stuff,
That's really sad, isn't it? There is so much by association, though, isn't there? I mean, you see people saying, like, well, that Margaret Nelson one to Innocent Smoothie. Yes. Why are you following this old woman who is transphobic? And Innocent were like, whoa, you're right. Let's make a massive public fuss and vilify this woman.
Yeah, one of my in real life friends.
Kiva followed 2 seconds later. Did exactly the same thing, Kiva.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. It's extraordinary. Yeah.
And
it's also.
I was just gonna say, like I have a real life friend liked one of my gender critical tweets, and I literally called him up and was like, "That was the nicest thing. Thank you so much." That was such a show of solidarity. I was just like, "Wow, that's so kind of you." But to go back to what you're saying, James, about the gay community, this sort of fixation on straight men, and this, this actually goes into why a lot of gay males who are very effeminate become transgender. You see this a lot. It goes right to the 98% thing. If you want to be attractive to straight men and you're a very effeminate gay man, you're going to find more success with straight men than with gay men if you adopt a trans identity. In North America, every city used to at least have like an alt weekly newspaper, like a free newspaper that would, be very leftist center and would have all the gig listings for the cool shows and concerts. And the back pages would be pages and pages and pages of transsexual sex for hire, right? The Village Voice, all these kinds of magazines in North America. They make all their money from thousands and thousands and thousands of all these terms that you don't use anymore. T-girl, you know, stuff you're just not supposed to say anymore. But so it's very, very common for straight men to want to engage in sexual relations with gay males who will adopt feminine physiques but still have a penis. So that's a big motivator for a lot of people to become transsexual. And we're not supposed to say this. A lot of gay males do it because they want to be fuckable to straight men, you know? Society is all about wanting to be appealing, right? And if you're a very effeminate gay man, switching over to womanhood, you're going to find more success literally sexually, but you're also going to feel better because you'll feel like you look like in the glossy magazines. Juno Dawson made a very good example when she said that to be a gay man is a consolation prize.
Yeah,
you know,
I
she basically just coming right out and saying, you know, you poor gay guys who can't get straight guys, you're stuck with each other, these effeminate homosexuals. When I can get the real burly manly guys because I've had a or I've, you know, identified as trans. I found that so insulting and homophobic.
So did I.
But I also found it kind of sad because there's an element of internalized homophobia, you know. And it's so taboo to talk about this, that transsexualism doesn't just well up from within. It's an interaction with society and how you want to fit yourself into society, you know? And some of it has to do with internalized homophobia. Some of it has to do with desire. And some of it has to do with straight men's homophobia. They only want to sleep with other males if those males pretend they're females, you know? And that's another reason why so many straight guys are so ravenous about trans women or women, I think, is that sometimes they want to have sex with them and they don't want to admit that they're having sex with men, you know?
Well, we used to have this discussion, didn't we, about lady boys, which I haven't heard of in years, about straight men traveling to Thailand for the lady boy experience. So it sort of makes sense, you know. But I'm now thinking to myself, are we talking about transsexuals? We're talking about transgender, which is different. This is what annoys me about the umbrella, is that, you know, I feel so much for the brave trans women who are on Twitter, and I mean, they get just as bad abuse. Actual people who have
worse sometimes
transitioned.
We're talking about Debbie Hayton and people like this.
Yes, I'm amazed at the strength that they have. I'm in awe of them, because what are they? To use that old-fashioned expression, they're accused of being sort of transsexual Uncle Toms.
Yes.
What's
the other phrase that's used? It's like the most nastiest phrase that used against transsexual people. What's that word, Artie? You know it. You know what I mean.
Forget. I do, but
someone will pop it in comments.
Yeah, but it's hard too, because a lot of
true scum.
Yeah, scum. Calling transsexuals scum and thinking you're pro-trans is like insane.
Yes,
it's really hard for these transsexuals. There's been so much, you know, a lot of women, a lot of feminists rightly are very angry about this entire gender identity movement, but that's causing so much damage to genuine sympathetic transsexuals who never wanted, or who were trying not to, may not have done a perfect job, but we're trying not to impinge on women's rights and trying to be respectful and still find a place. And now they're being, you know, it's just getting harder and harder for people like Debbie Hayton, people like Emma, who just like are trying to be friendly, you know, and everything's just become hard on both sides.
But also there were so few transsexuals that women sort of said, yeah, you know, that's fine. We'll, you know, we didn't necessarily sign up for it, you know, but there was that debate in Parliament. It's, you know, it's in Hansard, isn't it? And fine, you know, you can use our spaces because there are so few of you. But that is so completely different now. And because of it, you know, women are having to say, well, no one, because you can't, you know, the rule has to be, if you were born male, no, because there is no, you know, because right now it's all or nothing. It is so binary that unless you can't just say, I mean, I guess you could say, and what I say is, if you've actually, you know, gone to the effort of having a sex changed operation, then, you know, I'd say the compromise, I would accept that. You know, they can use women's spaces, but I can absolutely recognize that not all women feel the same. And you have to actually go for that sort of lowest common denominator. You have to understand that if there is, you know, it has to be a massive super majority of.
But Helen, I mean, you almost sound you almost sound apologetic there, but I think that one of the things that has happened in recent years is we all know very well there's been a long sympathy, a long-lasting sympathy between trans identified males and women, but it's been pissed away by these violent, nasty, demanding, authoritarian trans rights activists. And I know a lot of women whose attitude is hardened and they won't use female pronouns. Yeah.
Mine is really hard.
What do you expect if you get sent videos that I see daily, pictures of men with their cocks out, erect, posing in the mirror, saying gloating, saying, "Ha ha, yes. I'm in here, and there's nothing you can do about it." Now that's not about rights or anything. That's about saying
power.
Fuck you. That's saying
it is.
That's saying fuck you.
Misogyny.
And I think, what is this? It's the gloating about it, and that's where you see the misogyny. There's nothing you can do about it.
No, that's right. That's absolutely right, James. That's exactly what I when I had that conversation with that transgender person, the one that starts with not, and they said, I can use. I am going to get. Have me and my dick are going to use women's changing rooms, and there's nothing you can do about it. And it was exactly that was the tweet.
Yeah,
and it was about power. I'm going to win. I'm going to kick you. I'm going to kick you down, and I'm going to say I can use it, and I don't care about you. And it is absolutely about that. It's unpleasant. It's absolutely. I think this is what I was saying. I'm afraid that I think that the unpleasantness is almost part of it now. The ability to be misogynistic and revel in it and have right on your side.
And let me remind people of a very important fact about that person who wrote that to you, Helen. This is not some teenage kid on Twitter. This is a person who writes regularly for the independent newspaper. This is a fucking journalist who said that. They also said things like, "I like pissing on the seats to piss off TERFs" and stuff like this. That kind of disgusting entitlement and power trip. I totally agree with women that, I try not to use female pronouns for trans-identified males now, simply because I don't want to hurt the feelings of the women who've been abused in that way. And I won't do it anymore. I work around it. And there's certain people who I really love, like Debbie Hayton, who's just been a complete true friend throughout all this. And
absolutely.
I do have a slight rule that personally, I will always use female pronouns for people who aren't misogynists. I think that's like a good starting point,
Well, none of us hate trans people. We're not anti-trans at all. We just want to go back to when it was normal. It was Blair White, who I have some disagreements with, but I'm always happy to hear when someone I disagree with says something I agree with. I want to highlight that. Blair White tweeted yesterday, 2010, nobody can change their sexual orientation. Lady Gaga, right? 2021. You need to start having sex with trans people or you're a bigot. And then she writes, "Can we just go back, please?" Going back is what all we want. Remember Helen, you mentioned, the Gender Recognition Act 2004, which passed in 2005, all the public consultation around it, they were very open. The trans activists were saying, listen, we know that this would be disruptive to women's rights if there were many of us, but it's just a very small number of people who are going to become genuine transsexuals. This was their argument. And we know that if it was more people, it would be disruptive to women's rights, explicitly saying this. The trans activists themselves, they were saying, we have to have a firm material distinction between a man and a trans woman. You can't just self-declare. You have to go through a process of recognition. Trans activists saying this, trans activists saying, look, there is still, even with this, there should be times when women have their own spaces. We want to be as close as we can to genuine women, but we recognize that biology will still matter in extreme circumstances. This is trans activists saying this, like everything trans activists were saying were exactly what we're saying. That was not long ago. 2005 is the year the show Grey's Anatomy premiered. They're still making episodes of Grey's Anatomy. Like there's TV series that are still on from the first episode to the most recent episode. We've just descended into chaos, The year 2005, when they passed that, Harry Potter 4 was in theaters. the world was normal. You know, Cedric Diggory got killed. It was so tragic. And now, you know, and trans people and trans activism was moderately reasonable. Let's just go back. Let's just go back in time to 2004.
James, let me ask you a question, James.
Yeah.
If we went back in time and you knew what you know now, and I phoned you and I said, "Will you sign this letter about Stonewall?" What would you say?
Do you know something? I've thought long and hard about this, Graham. I tell you this, it's in my nature. I've always had a thing in my nature about injustice, and it's always got me. If something wasn't fair, ever since I was a kid, and my mother reminded me of this the other week, and I honestly believe with all my heart I would have gone bang into this in exactly the same way. I just needed to hear. I needed to have my eyes. I needed the curtain just to do that and to actually read what people were saying and think, there is no way I could have kept quiet about this, even if I wanted to. So if my acting career goes down the pan, I think to myself, well, there's no way I could have kept quiet. It's just the type of person I am.
That's how I feel about the writing career. You know, if I never get hired again to write a comedy, you know, this is so much more important. You know, we're talking about children's health and gay rights and women's rights. It's so important. Well, listen, James, you were in my first sitcom. You were in Paris.
I was.
You were, and it didn't quite work. One of the problems we had was that every episode was 40 minutes long because we refused to cut anything, and we learned on the job on Paris. But James, you were one of my favorite things about it. You were so funny, and I loved you as well.
I had so much fun doing that. One of my favorite characters I've ever played.
His name was Dick. Yeah. Go on.
One of my favorites of all time. I mean, I could play that character for the rest of my life. If I was cast in a soap tomorrow, if he was Ladunia, I'd be happy.
Well, you know, we did have some good jokes in it. I will say that there were some cracking jokes, and you delivered them. You delivered them beautifully. And I think if you know, I'm sure this fever will break at some point, and we'll see you back on stage. I also saw you. Another treat which was seeing you and the producers, which was just a fantastic experience.
Yeah, great. Yes.
Oh, wonderful. And I must ask you about a certain actor in that show, because I've heard things about that he may not have been very nice. But I'll ask you about that off screen.
Oh, you have to ask me about that offline.
Yes, okay, I will. But I'm sure we'll see you on soon. The fever will break. People will realize they're being insane. And James, in the meantime, lovely to have you on. And I hope we can get you. Okay, we'll hang around. We'll say goodbye properly, and I'll find out that gossip. But we'll say goodbye to everybody else. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week. Thank you, Helen.
Like and subscribe. Remember?
Like and subscribe and buy us a coffee.
Yeah, buy us a coffee.
Bye.
Bye.